representing the Director of Cricket at Cricket South Africa, Graeme Smith, says the findings that his behaviour was racially prejudiced are fatally flawed. The report by the Social Justice and Nation-Building hearings also found that Smith and the national proteas coach, Marc Boucher, were not properly appointed and that the proper procedures were ignored. The findings were made by the chair of the inquiry, Advocate dumisa ntsebeza. He said Smith's refusal to work under the former CSA CEO Thebang Mogoe may have had elements of racial prejudice. Firdose Moonda is a cricket journalist for Cricinfo. She's been Espncricinfo. She's been following this story very, very closely. Firdose, good afternoon to you. I really appreciate the time. This is a huge issue. There's a large number of issues to get through. Let's focus on Graeme Smith first. The findings about his racial, or actually racist behaviour. How serious are these findings?
I guess pretty serious in that you definitely want to interrogate whether a person who's in a position of extreme power, really, of cricket in this country has historically demonstrated racial bias or racial prejudice and how that affects the way that he works today. So I don't think that the report told us anything that we really, really don't know, in that I feel like over many years and even compositions of national teams, it's been quite clear that there is racial prejudice in South African cricket, in South African sport, and in South Africa. And really the report was just highlighting that through certain examples. I think the problem with the report is that the findings are not definitive. So although it says that Graeme Smith, Marc Boucher, and A.B. de Villiers are guilty of prejudicial conduct, it then also says that they are only tentatively guilty of that conduct. And you know, it's kind of neither here nor there. It's very much like a half-pregnant situation. You know, you either are or you aren't. So it doesn't make those definite findings, which is really problematic.
So, I mean, in a way, the whole problem with this is that Graeme Smith himself didn't testify. So it's never been put to him. And he's never, as far as I know, he hasn't done interviews about it. He hasn't answered questions on the record about it. We've never seen him responding to the question. Is that part of the problem here? I mean, many people have gone on many different journeys in our country. Sometimes those journeys have led to real change, personal change. Sometimes they haven't. And you can't assess that without the person themselves speaking.
I think it is part of the problem. He did submit a written affidavit, so there was no obligation on him to appear in person in front of the Ombudsman. There was no obligation on anybody. Participation in this process was entirely voluntary, and it's not a court case, and it's not a legal matter. So he did submit a written affidavit. That also has not been made public, which I think compounds the problem. I really think we need to be able to, if not at least hear, then read what it is that Graeme Smith has to say in response to the allegations. But I think he missed an opportunity, to be honest. You know, the Ombuds allowed for every testimony to be live streamed, which means that people with access to the internet could get an opportunity to then watch the testimony in full. And I think if you want your story out there and if you want people to try and understand your perspective, that is the best way to do it, is to go and present it in your own words. I know that Graeme Smith had reservations about the proceedings, and he seemed to be quite critical of the manner in which the Ombudsman was going about things, and that was why he chose not to appear in person, but instead to submit a written affidavit. But no, it's not good enough. You know, you're the Director of Cricket of an organization that's going through this process, and he should have testified.
Well, this takes us to the next point. I mean, the way he was appointed, there are problems there. I need to mention this. It's a big salary. It's over 5 million rand a year. Can he really stay on if he doesn't answer the questions, if he wasn't appointed properly, if he gets 5 million a year? I mean, until he speaks, until we get a proper defense from him, let me repeat, not his lawyer, I mean, it's, you know, there's going to be a perception that there's a strong case against him. I think that perception may be accurate.
Yeah, I think, look, his contract comes to an end at the end of March, and I strongly suspect that if nothing else moves between now and the end of March, there's a good chance that either he or Cricket South Africa will choose not to renew that contract. And I think we can all sort of see why, and we can see the impasse that's been reached here. I don't know that the Ombuds was within his mandate to look into the HR procedures of Cricket South Africa. Graeme Smith was essentially headhunted, which happens in these types of jobs all the time. What should not have happened is then a sham interview process took place where other candidates were interviewed and offered presentations all the time, where the organization knew that they were going to hire Graeme Smith. So that process is not great, but I don't see an evidence of racial bias there. And the Ombudsman didn't find an evidence of racial bias there. I think the bias, if anything, is that they were appointing the former captain into a role that deals exclusively with cricket. And, you know, we only have so many former captains. So I don't know that they then had that much choice in terms of if they wanted that caliber of person and those credentials. I think it's going to be difficult if we don't hear anything from Graeme Smith, but equally so it's difficult for Cricket South Africa to decide what to do now because, first of all, they don't have to act on the report at all. They're under no obligation. Secondly, if they choose to act on the report with its tentative findings, it leaves them open to legal ramifications, which could then include legal action by Smith and his lawyer or anybody else they take action against. But then if they don't act, there are members in the board, they're members of the public, they're people to whom they are accountable who will want to see action. So, yeah, they're really, rock in a hard place maybe doesn't even explain it properly. They are in a little bit of a mess because I don't know what they can do from here because that report is tentative.
And then you've got Marc Boucher, also appointed improperly by Graeme Smith. I mean, he's the coach of the team. He seems to be in a slightly different position in a way because he was appointed above the interim coach, Enoch Nkwe.
Yeah, so again, the HR procedures were not part of the Ombuds mandate, and Graeme Smith's job allows him to appoint the coach, and that's not unusual. Directors of cricket around the world or directors of whatever sport will be the ones who choose the coach. And it's also not like Graeme Smith went and picked some guy off the side of the street and said, come and coach the national team. He picked someone he knew, which is one aspect of the problem, and then he picked someone who was a very successful franchise coach, which is, potentially that's following exactly what you should do. Let's not forget that Enoch Nkwe's South African side lost in India, and they lost badly, and that he had only been a franchise coach for one season. I don't think any of the way that was handled was very good. It was also very rushed. You'll remember back in December 2019, there were 4 or 5 frantic days when half the board disappeared and Thebang Mogoe got suspended, and it was a big rush, and England were arriving, and South Africa needed a structure in place. You can't play against England without a coach and without a team, right? So you can't play against anyone, actually. So I just think we have to rewind to those events to really interrogate what happened. What is most interesting to me about the findings against Marc Boucher is that the level of ignorance, naivety, the privilege, I guess, that he displayed in singing a song with a racial slur in it, and he was not the only one who sang that song. But it really points to either that it's not important for people to find out why stuff like that shouldn't be said, or that they just don't care. And I think that is something that we really have to interrogate, is why are we getting this very defensive, oh, I didn't know better type of response, when really, we lived in an apartheid state and we still have the legacy of that all around us. We should know better.
Firdose, Moonda, really appreciate the time. Thanks very much indeed from ESPN Cricinfo.